Right now, 400 kilometers above your head, a satellite the size of a school bus is quietly turning to point its cameras at a military base most people have never heard of. It can read a license plate from orbit. It can hear a phone call bounce off a rooftop. And somewhere else in that same dark sky, another machine built on the other side of the planet is doing the exact same thing, pointed the other way. There has been no declaration, no headline, no press conference. But for more than a decade, the United States and China have been fighting a war that never fires a single visible shot, a war fought entirely in the silence of orbit, where the only sound is the faint hum of solar panels turning toward the sun. This is the story of that war. This is the story of the satellites that watch us, the weapons built to kill them, and the countdown that is already running toward a conflict that could begin not with a missile, but with a single blinking light going dark 200 miles above the Pacific Ocean. For most of human history, war was something you could see. Armies marched across fields. Ships fired broadsides you could watch from the shore. Even the atomic bomb, for all its horror, produced a flash and a mushroom cloud that the entire world could witness. But the war unfolding above us right now produces nothing you can see with your own eyes. It happens in a domain most people never think about, a domain 300 to 36,000 kilometers straight up, where there is no sound, no weather, and technically, under decades-old treaties, no ownership. And yet that empty darkness has become the most contested piece of real estate on Earth, because whoever controls it controls something far more valuable than land or oil. They control information. They control communication. They control the ability to see everything, everywhere, all the time. Let's start with why satellites matter so much to a military in the first place. Because once you understand this, everything else about this rivalry will click into place. A modern military cannot function without space. Every precision-guided bomb dropped by an American aircraft depends on GPS signals bounced down from satellites to hit its target within a few meters. Every warship needs satellite communication to coordinate with commanders thousands of miles away. Every early warning system that detects a missile launch depends on infrared sensors sitting in geostationary orbit, watching the entire surface of the planet for the telltale heat signature of a rocket engine igniting. Take away the satellites, and a modern army does not become slightly less effective. It becomes almost blind, almost deaf, and almost incapable of coordinated action. This is why both Washington and Beijing have spent the last 20 years quietly building two of the most sophisticated military space programs in human history, and why both nations have also spent that same time building the weapons needed to blind, deafen, and destroy the other sides. Satellites the moment a real conflict begins. The story really accelerates in 2007, on a cold January morning in Sichuan province. China launched a modified ballistic missile, the SC-19, straight up into low Earth orbit. Its target was one of China's own aging weather satellites, the Fengyun 1C, sitting roughly 865 kilometers above the planet. The missile struck the satellite directly, not with an explosive warhead, but through sheer kinetic force, the violence of two objects colliding at more than 8 kilometers per second. The satellite did not just break. It vaporized into more than 3,000 pieces of trackable debris, and untold thousands of smaller fragments too small to track, but still lethal to anything they might hit. That single test instantly became the largest debris-generating event in the history of spaceflight, and it sent an unmistakable message to the rest of the world. China had just demonstrated in the most public way possible that it could destroy a satellite in orbit whenever it chose to. The reaction in Washington was immediate and, frankly, a little bit panicked. For decades, American strategists had assumed space was a sanctuary, a domain where the normal rules of warfare simply did not apply because no one had the ability or the desire to fight there. That assumption died the moment the Fengyun satellite shattered. Within a year, the United States conducted its own anti-satellite test, Operation Burnt Frost, destroying a malfunctioning American spy satellite called USA-193 with a missile fired from a Navy cruiser. American officials insisted this was purely about preventing a dangerous fuel tank from surviving re-entry, and there was truth to that concern, but the timing and the symbolism were impossible to ignore. Two nations, each capable of shattering objects in orbit, had just shown their hand within 12 months of each other. The silent space war had officially begun, even if almost nobody outside of defense circles noticed at the time. To understand where this rivalry stands today, we need to look at what each side has actually built, starting with reconnaissance, the art of watching from above. The United States built its reputation on space-based intelligence gathering through the National Reconnaissance Office, an agency so secretive that its very existence was not publicly acknowledged until the 1990s. The NRO operates a constellation of optical reconnaissance satellites descended from a lineage that traces back to the Corona program of the Cold War. When the first American spy satellites literally dropped canisters of exposed film out of orbit to be caught in midair by aircraft over the Pacific. Today's versions are vastly more capable. Satellites in the KH-11 family, often compared in size and optics to the Hubble Space Telescope, but pointed down instead of out, are believed to resolve details on the ground finer than 10 centimeters. That is precision sharp enough to distinguish between two similar model vehicles parked next to each other, or to count individual aircraft on a runway thousands of kilometers away. China's answer to this capability has grown at a pace that stunned Western analysts. The Yaogan series of satellites, officially described as remote sensing platforms for scientific and civilian research, are widely assessed by defense analysts to serve primarily military reconnaissance purposes. China has launched these in clusters, often 3 satellites at a time, flying in tight formation to perform naval reconnaissance through a technique called ocean surveillance, where multiple satellites triangulate the position of a moving ship by measuring tiny differences in the timing of signals they detect. This is not a small program. China has launched reconnaissance satellites at a rate that, by some counts, now exceeds the launch cadence of the United States, filling low Earth orbit with an ever-growing web of eyes, specifically designed to track the movement of American aircraft carriers across the Pacific Ocean. And that detail matters enormously, because it points to the actual strategic logic driving so much of Beijing's investment in space. China's military planners have spent 2 decades building what analysts call an anti-access, area denial strategy, a set of capabilities designed to make it prohibitively costly and dangerous for the United States Navy to operate near China's coastline in the event of a crisis, most plausibly one centered on Taiwan. Ballistic missiles capable of striking a moving aircraft carrier at sea sound almost like science fiction, but they only work if you can find that carrier in the first place, track it continuously, and feed targeting data to the missile in real time. That entire kill chain depends on satellites. Without space-based reconnaissance, China's much-discussed carrier-killer missiles are essentially blind. With it, they become one of the most significant asymmetric threats the United States Navy has faced since the end of the Cold War. Now let's talk about navigation, because this is a part of the story most people never think about, even though they use it every single day. The Global Positioning System, GPS, was built and is still operated by the United States Air Force, later transferred to the newly formed Space Force. It was designed from the beginning as a military system, one that happens to also power the map application on your phone. But GPS was never meant to be a strategic dependency for a rival power, and China understood that vulnerability better than almost anyone. If the United States ever wanted to deny GPS signals to Chinese forces during a conflict, either through jamming or through simply shutting off precision access, China's entire military would suddenly lose the ability to guide missiles, coordinate troop movements, or synchronize operations with the accuracy modern warfare demands. So China built its own system from scratch. It's called Beidou, named after the Chinese term for the Big Dipper constellation, and its development stands as one of the most ambitious space infrastructure projects of the 21st century. The final and most advanced generation, Beidou 3, achieved full global coverage in 2020, giving China navigation independence from the American system for the first time in its history. This was not a minor technical achievement. It required dozens of satellite launches, the development of atomic clocks accurate enough to place a position anywhere on Earth within centimeters under ideal conditions, and a ground infrastructure capable of managing the entire constellation independently of any foreign system. Beidou now guides Chinese military hardware, from precision-guided munitions to naval vessels to the increasingly sophisticated drones rolling out of Chinese defense factories. It has also been exported commercially to dozens of countries, extending Chinese technological influence far beyond its own borders, in direct competition with the American GPS system that has quietly underpinned global navigation for half a century. This brings us to one of the most unsettling parts of the story: the weapons built specifically to attack satellites themselves. These fall into several broad categories, and understanding each one reveals just how sophisticated this hidden arms race has become. The most dramatic category is the kinetic kill vehicle, the same basic concept China demonstrated in 2007, a projectile launched from the ground designed to physically smash into a satellite at extreme velocity. Both the United States and China have demonstrated this capability, and both understand its terrible drawback, the debris problem. A single kinetic anti-satellite strike can create thousands of pieces of shrapnel that remain in orbit for years or even decades, threatening every other satellite, including the attacker's own, that shares a similar orbital path. This is why, since the international outcry following China's 2007 test, both nations have generally avoided repeating destructive tests, though both have continued testing the missile technology itself against simulated or non-destructive targets. Far more concerning to space security experts is a second, quieter category of weapon, the co-orbital satellite. Instead of launching a missile from the ground, a nation places a specialized satellite into orbit alongside a target, one equipped with robotic arms, grappling mechanisms, or simply enough fuel to maneuver directly into a collision course. China has conducted numerous tests of satellites equipped with robotic arms, officially described as debris removal technology demonstrations, a purpose that is entirely plausible and also, conveniently, identical to the technology needed to grapple and disable an enemy satellite without creating a debris cloud at all. American officials have expressed growing alarm about a Chinese satellite called Shijian-21, which was observed maneuvering close to and eventually towing a defunct Chinese navigation satellite to a graveyard orbit, a maneuver that demonstrated exactly the kind of precision, rendezvous, and robotic capture skill that would be needed to disable an adversary's satellite without firing a single shot. The United States has pursued similar dual-use technology through programs aimed at satellite servicing and space logistics, technology explicitly marketed as enabling refueling and repair of aging satellites in orbit, extending their operational lives by years. But defense analysts on both sides understand the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath these civilian-sounding programs. A robotic arm gentle enough to dock with a friendly satellite and attach a fuel line is also precise enough to grapple an enemy satellite and disable its sensors, jam its antenna, or simply nudge it into an unusable orbit. This is what makes the modern space arms race so difficult to track and so dangerous to manage. Almost every capability being developed has a civilian justification and a military application, and it is often genuinely impossible to know, from the outside, which purpose a given satellite is truly designed to serve until the moment it is actually used. Then there are the directed energy weapons, systems that use lasers or high-powered microwaves instead of physical projectiles. Ground-based lasers powerful enough to dazzle or blind the optical sensors of a reconnaissance satellite passing overhead do not need to destroy the satellite physically. They simply need to overwhelm its cameras with light, temporarily or permanently damaging the delicate sensors inside. China has invested heavily in ground-based laser facilities, and American intelligence assessments have repeatedly flagged concerns that Chinese lasers may already be capable of disrupting American reconnaissance satellites during their passes over Chinese territory. The United States, for its part, has pursued its own directed energy research, though much of the American program remains far more classified than its Chinese counterparts' more visible testing sites. The appeal of these weapons for military planners is obvious. A laser strike leaves no debris, is difficult to attribute definitively, and can sometimes be walked back diplomatically as an unfortunate accident rather than an overt act of war, all while achieving the tactical goal of blinding an adversary at the exact moment it matters most. Electronic warfare represents yet another front in this conflict, and it may actually be the most active battlefield of all, simply because it happens constantly, quietly, and without the dramatic visibility of a missile launch. Both nations operate sophisticated jamming systems designed to overwhelm satellite communication links and GPS navigation signals with electromagnetic noise, rendering them useless without physically damaging anything at all. Jamming is cheap, reversible, and deniable, which makes it the weapon of choice for gray zone competition, the murky space below open warfare where nations test each other's defenses, probe for weaknesses, and signal resolve without crossing the threshold into outright conflict. Reports of GPS jamming and spoofing incidents in contested regions like the South China Sea and the Baltic have become almost routine, a quiet reminder that the electromagnetic spectrum above our heads is already a contested battle space, even in what most people would still call peacetime. Let's talk about the institutions each country has built to manage this fight, because the organizational story here is almost as revealing as the technology itself. The United States Space Force was formally established in December of 2019, becoming the first new independent military branch created in America since the Air Force split off from the Army in 1947. Its creation was, at the time, mocked by some commentators as an unnecessary bureaucratic novelty, but the underlying strategic logic was sound and had been building for years. Space had become too important, too contested, and too dangerous to remain a secondary mission tucked inside the Air Force's broader portfolio. The Space Force exists specifically to organize, train, and equip forces for the purpose of protecting American interests in orbit, and its leadership has been remarkably candid in public testimony about the scale of the threat it now faces from both China and Russia. China's equivalent organizational shift came earlier and, in some ways, was even more consequential. In 2015, China restructured its entire military around a new organization called the Strategic Support Force, a body specifically designed to unify space, cyber, and electronic warfare capabilities under a single command structure. This was a genuinely innovative organizational choice, one that recognized something Western militaries were slower to fully embrace: the idea that space warfare, cyber warfare, and electronic warfare are not really separate domains at all, but three interlocking pieces of the same integrated information war. A satellite can be attacked kinetically, electronically, or through a cyber intrusion into its ground control systems, and an adversary who can coordinate all three approaches simultaneously holds an enormous advantage over one who treats them as separate problems handled by separate agencies. In 2024, China further reorganized this structure, splitting some responsibilities into new dedicated forces, a sign that Beijing continues to actively refine how it organizes for this kind of conflict, treating the structure itself as a living strategic document rather than a fixed bureaucratic arrangement. Now, let's zoom out and ask the question that actually matters most to anyone watching this unfold. What would a real conflict in space actually look like, and how close are we to one? Most serious defense analysts agree that a war beginning entirely in space, with no connection to events on the ground, is extremely unlikely. Space warfare almost certainly would not be the opening act of a conflict on its own. Instead, the far more plausible scenario is one where a crisis begins on Earth, most likely centered on Taiwan given the current strategic landscape, and space becomes one of the first and most critical battlegrounds precisely because both sides understand how much they depend on it. In the opening hours of such a conflict, American and Chinese forces would each have overwhelming incentive to blind the other side as quickly as possible, jamming communication satellites, dazzling reconnaissance platforms, and potentially even employing kinetic or co-orbital weapons against the most critical nodes in the other side's space architecture. This is precisely why both nations have spent the last decade also investing heavily in resilience, the ability to survive an attack on space infrastructure and keep functioning anyway. The old model of a handful of enormous, expensive, irreplaceable satellites, each one a single point of failure, is rapidly being replaced by a new philosophy built around proliferation and redundancy. The United States Space Development Agency has been aggressively building out a constellation known as Proliferated Warfighter Space Architecture, hundreds of smaller, cheaper satellites in low Earth orbit, deliberately designed so that losing any individual satellite, or even a dozen of them, would barely dent the overall capability of the network. This mirrors the same logic that companies like SpaceX pioneered commercially with Starlink, where thousands of small satellites make the entire constellation remarkably resistant to any single point of attack. China has been pursuing a parallel strategy with its own emerging low-orbit constellations, including a project sometimes referred to as Guowang, widely understood to serve both commercial and military resilience purposes simultaneously. It's worth pausing here to talk about Starlink specifically, because it has become an unexpectedly central character in this entire story, despite being, on paper, a commercial internet service. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Starlink terminals became a critical lifeline for Ukrainian military communications, demonstrating in real time just how decisive a resilient, distributed satellite network could be in an actual shooting war. Chinese military researchers took careful notice. Multiple Chinese academic papers and military commentaries in the years since have explicitly discussed Starlink as a potential threat to be neutralized in any future conflict involving the United States, precisely because its scale and distribution make it so difficult to disable through traditional anti-satellite methods. This has, in turn, accelerated Chinese investment in exactly the kind of proliferated, resilient satellite architecture that Starlink represents, along with continued research into anti-satellite technologies, specifically designed to counter massive, distributed constellations, rather than the handful of large, isolated targets that defined earlier eras of space warfare. Let's also talk about something that rarely makes headlines, but genuinely worries space security experts more than almost anything else: the sheer fragility of the orbital environment itself. Low Earth orbit is not an infinite ocean. It is a finite, increasingly crowded shell of space, and every piece of debris created by a destructive anti-satellite test remains there for years, sometimes decades, traveling at speeds that turn even a paint fleck into a potentially catastrophic impact. Scientists have long warned about a scenario known as the Kessler syndrome, first described by NASA scientist Donald Kessler back in 1978, in which a cascade of collisions in orbit creates so much debris that certain orbital shells become effectively unusable for generations. A self-perpetuating chain reaction where debris creates more debris in an unstoppable cascade. A full-scale kinetic war in orbit, even a limited one involving a handful of destructive strikes, could trigger exactly this kind of cascade, potentially rendering large portions of low Earth orbit unusable not just for military satellites, but for the weather forecasting, communication, and navigation infrastructure that the entire global civilian economy now depends on. This is the terrifying shared incentive that, so far, has kept both nations from crossing the most destructive lines available to them. A mutual understanding that a truly reckless space war would harm the attacker almost as much as the target. Let's shift to talk about the geostationary belt, a completely different and in some ways even more strategically vital region of space, sitting roughly 36,000 kilometers above the equator, where a satellite's orbital period exactly matches Earth's rotation, allowing it to hover apparently motionless over a single point on the planet below. This is where early warning satellites live, the system specifically designed to detect the infrared flash of a ballistic missile, launch anywhere on Earth within seconds of ignition. The American Space-Based Infrared System, known as SBIRS, and its next-generation successor, the Next Generation Overhead Persistent Infrared System, sit in this critical belt, providing the United States with continuous, real-time detection of missile launches worldwide, a capability considered absolutely foundational to strategic stability, because a nation that can reliably detect a launch has far less incentive to adopt a hair trigger. Launch on warning nuclear posture out of fear that it might not otherwise see an attack coming in time to respond. China has been rapidly building its own equivalent early warning architecture in recent years, a significant and relatively new development, since for decades China's nuclear posture relied on a smaller arsenal and a declared policy of no first use, reducing the perceived urgency of a dedicated early warning satellite network. That calculus has clearly shifted. As China's nuclear arsenal has expanded substantially over the past decade, so has its investment in the kind of space-based infrared detection capability needed to support a more sophisticated and more responsive nuclear command structure. This matters enormously for global stability, because the geostationary belt is also, uncomfortably, one of the hardest regions of space to defend and one of the most consequential to lose access to. Unlike the crowded, proliferated constellations in low Earth orbit, there are only so many useful geostationary slots, and the satellites that occupy them tend to be exquisite, expensive, and irreplaceable on short notice, making them tempting, high-value targets in the earliest, most dangerous hours of any hypothetical conflict. It's also worth talking about the intelligence-gathering satellites that never get much public attention, the signals intelligence platforms that don't take pictures at all, but instead listen. These satellites, often flying in geostationary orbit or in wide, sweeping elliptical orbits, are designed to intercept radio transmissions, radar signals, and communications traffic from across an entire hemisphere. The United States has operated sophisticated signals intelligence satellites under the NRO's most classified programs for decades, systems believed capable of intercepting cell phone conversations, military radar emissions, and diplomatic communications simultaneously from a single orbital position. China has been developing comparable signals intelligence capabilities, though independent open-source analysts generally assess the American program as still holding a significant technological edge in this particular area, built on a head start of more than half a century of continuous investment and operational refinement. Now let's talk about something genuinely strange and fascinating, the world of satellite inspection and shadowing, sometimes described by analysts using the almost poetic phrase, the dance in the dark. Both American and Chinese satellites have, on numerous documented occasions, maneuvered unusually close to each other or to third-party satellites, sometimes coming within just a few kilometers, a distance that sounds enormous until you remember these objects are traveling at roughly 7.5 kilometers per second, meaning a few kilometers of separation represents mere seconds of reaction time if something were to go wrong. American Space Force officials have publicly described Chinese satellites conducting what they call rendezvous and proximity operations near sensitive American assets, essentially practicing the exact maneuvers that would be required to inspect, disable, or capture another nation's satellite in a real conflict. China has made similar observations and similar accusations about American behavior in orbit. Neither side is likely being fully transparent about its own activities, and this mutual shadowing has become a kind of silent, continuous rehearsal for a conflict that both sides hope never actually arrives. A strange orbital chess match playing out in near total secrecy, thousands of kilometers above the heads of people who have absolutely no idea it's happening. Let's also address the cyber dimension of this rivalry, because a satellite is not just a piece of hardware floating in space. It is a hardware platform controlled by ground stations, uplinks, and software systems that are just as vulnerable to hacking as any other computer network on Earth, arguably more so, given how difficult it is to physically secure a facility that must, by its very nature, broadcast and receive signals across vast distances. A sophisticated cyber intrusion into a satellite's ground control system could allow an attacker to feed false data to operators, corrupt onboard software, or in the most extreme scenario, seize partial control of a satellite's orientation and communication systems without ever physically touching the spacecraft itself. Both the United States and China maintain extensive cyber warfare capabilities specifically dedicated to this kind of space system intrusion, and defense officials on both sides have acknowledged, in carefully hedged public testimony, that satellite ground infrastructure represents one of the most attractive and most vulnerable targets in the entire military space enterprise. Precisely because a successful cyber attack leaves none of the visible debris or diplomatic fallout that a kinetic strike would create. So where does all of this leave us today, in the middle of this decade, as this rivalry continues to accelerate? The honest answer is that both nations are locked in a genuine, full-spectrum competition across every layer of space-based military capability, from reconnaissance to navigation to early warning to the weapons designed to deny all of it to the other side. The United States retains significant advantages in several areas, particularly in the sophistication and maturity of its most exquisite reconnaissance and signals intelligence platforms, built on decades of accumulated engineering experience that cannot be replicated overnight. But China has demonstrated a remarkable ability to close gaps quickly, launching satellites at a pace that increasingly rivals or exceeds American launch rates, building an independent navigation constellation from scratch in under 2 decades, and developing an organizational structure through the Strategic Support Force that some analysts believe is actually better integrated for fighting a genuinely multi-domain war than the more traditionally siloed American approach. Even as the Space Force works rapidly to close that particular gap, what makes this rivalry genuinely different from previous arms races in human history is the shared vulnerability at its core. Both nations depend on space more than any previous generation of military planners ever imagined possible, and that mutual dependence creates a strange, uneasy form of stability, a recognition on both sides that a truly destructive war in orbit would inflict catastrophic, possibly permanent damage on the very domain both militaries need to function, not just during the conflict itself, but for years or decades afterward, regardless of who technically wins. This is sometimes described by strategists as a mutual assured disruption, an echo of the older nuclear concept of mutual assured destruction, except calibrated for a domain where the weapons don't need to kill people directly to inflict devastating strategic damage. It is entirely possible that this shared vulnerability, this recognition that space debris does not respect national borders, and that a cascading collision event could blind every nation's satellites simultaneously, may end up being the single most important restraint keeping this rivalry from crossing into open, destructive conflict. Even as both sides continue to build ever more sophisticated tools capable of crossing that line the moment either government decides the strategic calculus demands it. As we close out this deep dive, it's worth sitting with the strange, quiet reality of what we've just described. Right now, tonight, as you're watching this, hundreds of military satellites from both nations are continuing their silent orbits overhead, cameras trained on naval bases, sensors listening for radio traffic, robotic arms tested and retested in preparation for maneuvers their operators hope they will never actually need to perform in anger. There has been no war declared in orbit, and there may never be one. But the infrastructure for that war, the reconnaissance networks, the navigation systems, the jamming platforms, the co-orbital weapons disguised as servicing satellites, all of it already exists, already operational, already circling silently above every single one of us, whether we ever look up and think about it or not. The next great power conflict, if it ever comes, may well begin not with the roar of an engine or the flash of an explosion, but with something far quieter, a single satellite going dark, 200 kilometers above the Pacific, and the whole world realizing all at once that the silent war above our heads had just become very loud indeed. If this deep dive into the hidden space war between the world's two most powerful militaries opened your eyes to something you had never considered before, make sure you subscribe to this channel, because we cover the frontier of astronomy, space science, and the technology reshaping our future every single week. Drop a comment below and tell us which part of this story surprised you the most, and if you want us to go even deeper into any single piece of this puzzle, whether that's the Kessler Syndrome, the Space Force, or China's Strategic Support Force, let us know, because your comments genuinely shape what we cover next. Thank you for spending this hour with us, and we'll see you in the next one.